when authenticity becomes your superpower. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt like you needed to shrink, to fold yourself into origami just to fit someone else's pocket sized expectations? That sensation of diminishing yourself, of becoming less so that others can feel more. It's a familiar dance for too many of us. I recently had the extraordinary privilege of interviewing Persia McLeod, a revolutionary force whose wisdom has fundamentally transformed how I and countless others understand authenticity, healing, and community building. What struck me most about our conversation wasn't just what she said, but how she embodied every word. Unapologetically present, radiantly confident, and deeply committed to lifting others as she climbs. Persia isn't just talking about transformation. She's living it, breathing it, creating ripples that have become waves of change across industries and communities. The truth is, we're living in a world that constantly asks us to be less vocal, less visible, less in ourselves. Especially for Black women in professional spaces, this pressure doesn't just whisper, it screams. It shows up in meeting rooms where ideas are ignored until repeated by someone else. It manifests in performance reviews where confidence is labeled as aggression. It appears in the exhausting mental calculations of whether speaking up will reinforce a stereotype or whether staying silent means betraying your own truth. But what if I told you that the very things you've been taught to hide might actually be your greatest strengths? That's the revelation at the heart of what I learned from Persia. Your authenticity isn't just some feel good buzzword for Instagram captions. It's revolutionary, it's resistance. And for many of us, it's the difference between merely surviving and truly thriving. Let me paint a picture for you with some sobering reality. Statistics tell us that in corporate America, Black women make up just 8 to 12% of professionals across sectors. More disturbing still, 60% report experiencing racism in their workplaces. These aren't just numbers on a PowerPoint slide, they represent real people carrying invisible backpacks of trauma while trying to excel in environments that weren't designed for them to succeed. But here's where it gets interesting. The most powerful response to this reality isn't assimilation, it's authenticity. When Letitia Clark founded the Pink Parachute Diaries podcast, she wasn't just creating content, she was building sanctuary, a space where Black women professionals could finally exhale and say, "This is who I am. This is what I've experienced, and I refuse to apologize for either." The results were nothing short of transformative. Women who had suffered in silence, haunted by the angry Black woman stereotype, isolated by lack of community, suddenly found their voices, and more importantly, they found each other. One listener wrote to Letitia, "For the first time in my 15-year career, I don't feel alone. I don't feel crazy. I feel seen." Another shared, "I listened to your latest episode in my car and had to pull over because I was crying so hard, not from sadness, but from relief. Someone finally put words to what I've been feeling." That's the power of truth telling. It turns isolation into community. It transforms wounds into wisdom. But let's be honest, authenticity isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it's downright terrifying. There's vulnerability in visibility. There's risk in refusing to shrink. There's courage required to stand in your truth when the world has gotten comfortable with your silence. I'm reminded of Maya Angelou's words: "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. The pain of silence often exceeds the risk of speaking up." Consider Jacqueline M., whose story was featured on a recent Pink Parachute Diaries episode. For years, she carried unaddressed trauma, both personal and systemic, into every boardroom, every performance review, every interaction with colleagues. She was surviving, yes, but thriving, not even close. I was so busy proving I belonged there, she shared, that I forgot to ask if there was even where I wanted to be. I was chasing someone else's definition of success while abandoning my own. And the exhaustion of that, it's bone deep. The turning point came when Jacqueline stopped treating healing as something she'd get around to someday and started recognizing it as essential to her professional success. Not a luxury, a necessity. She began journaling, joined a community of other Black women professionals, found a therapist who understood the unique intersection of her identities. And slowly, sometimes painfully, she started processing what she'd been carrying. The transformation wasn't overnight, healing rarely is, but the results were undeniable. Greater confidence, deeper relationships with colleagues, reduced burnout, and perhaps most significantly, the ability to define success on her own terms rather than chasing external validation that would never fully satisfy. This is what it means to transform pain into purpose. Not to erase your scars, but to use them as fuel for growth and advocacy. And here's where it gets even more powerful. When you embrace your authentic self, when you show up as who you truly are rather than who others expect you to be, you don't just change your own life, you create permission for others to do the same. Trinine Davis understands this ripple effect intimately. Through her work with organizations nationwide, she's helping transform predominantly white workplaces so that Black excellence isn't just present, it drives change. Her approach goes beyond surface level diversity metrics. She pushes companies towards systemic reforms that value authenticity over assimilation, that prioritize mental health alongside career advancement. The results speak volumes. Organizations adopting her strategies have seen improved retention rates among diverse talent pools and measurable boosts in employee well being. Entire teams report higher morale thanks to new cultural norms centered on belonging. One executive who implemented Davis's recommendations shared, "We didn't just diversify our workforce, we transformed our workplace, and our bottom line reflects that success." This is the economic argument for authenticity. It's not just morally right, it's strategically smart. But let's bring this back to you, to your journey, to the spaces you navigate daily. What would change if you stopped apologizing for taking up space? If you embrace being too much, too passionate, too vocal, too ambitious, and recognize those qualities as your greatest assets, what might happen if you started your healing process today rather than waiting until you've made it? If you used your scars not as something to hide, but as something to honor, evidence of what you've survived and overcome, and what communities might form if you shared your story, not the polished Instagram worthy version, but the messy, complicated truth. I'm not suggesting this is easy. There's risk in visibility, there's vulnerability in truth telling, there's discomfort in healing. But as Persia McLeod so powerfully demonstrated in our interview, there's also tremendous freedom, freedom from the exhaustion of pretending, freedom from the isolation of silence, freedom to define success on your own terms rather than chasing someone else's definition. The most revolutionary thing a Black woman can do, she told me with that Gladys Knight smile. And Maya Angelou depth is to show up fully as herself in spaces never designed for her presence. That's not just personal empowerment, that's cultural transformation. So here's my challenge to you today, inspired directly by the wisdom Persia shared. Start your healthy healing process, whether through journaling your story, joining supportive communities, or simply allowing yourself space each day for honest self reflection. Commit now to not just surviving adversity, but transforming it into purpose driven action. Don't wait until you're fully healed to begin speaking up. Your voice, even with its cracks and tremors, may be exactly what someone else needs to hear to find their own. Remember what Audre Lorde taught us. Caring for myself is not self indulgence, it is self preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. In a world that often devalues Black women's contributions while extracting their labor, prioritizing your well being isn't selfish, it's revolutionary. Build community through truth telling, share your experiences, the triumphs and the struggles, knowing that your story might be the bridge someone else crosses to reach their own healing. And perhaps most importantly, embrace your authentic self unapologetically. Like Persia McLeod demonstrated so beautifully, being bossy, confident, and knowing you deserve every room you enter isn't just self acceptance, it's an act of resistance, a model for others who have never been told they can belong to. The journey won't be linear. There will be days when the mask feels safer than vulnerability, moments when silence seems easier than speaking up, times when healing feels too hard, too painful, too distant. In those moments, remember you're not alone. From Letitia Clark to Jacqueline M. to Trinine Davis to Persia McLeod herself, countless Black women are walking this path alongside you, transforming workplaces, creating communities, and redefining success on their own terms. Their stories, your stories, matter, not despite the struggles they contain, but because of them. So I leave you with this. Your authenticity is not negotiable. It is not conditional. It is not something to be earned or granted by others. It is your birthright. And in a world that profits from your self doubt, your conformity, your silence, claiming that birthright is nothing short of revolutionary, the question isn't whether you deserve to take up space. The question is, what worlds might we create together when we all stop shrinking and start shining? What innovations might emerge when we value diverse voices, not despite their differences, but because of them? What healing might occur personally and collectively when we stop hiding our wounds and start sharing our wisdom? This is your invitation to find out, not tomorrow, not when everything is perfect, not when the world finally makes space for you today, right now, as you are, because your authenticity isn't just your superpower, it's your legacy.